First, though, other news. Hurricane Helene's death toll has now surpassed 115, making it the third deadliest storm in the last 50 years. The Biden administration has pledged the federal government's full support and assistance. Vice President Harris cut short her West Coast swing for a FEMA briefing in Washington today. And the president says he will help storm survivors, quote, for as long as it takes.
I want them to know we're not leaving until the job is done. I also want you to know I'm committed to traveling to the impacted areas as soon as possible.
For his part, former President Trump spent today at an emergency command center in Georgia. He has, in various ways, criticized the Biden and Harris administration's response to the storm thus far. We are also tracking a very volatile situation in the Middle East. Israel launches ground raids against Hezbollah in Lebanon. We'll have more on that later this hour. Scott MacFarlane joins us now from Valdosta, Georgia. Scott, what do you know? What have you seen? What can you share with us?
The building behind me, a business that was ravaged by this hurricane, is representative of a lot of what you'd see if you toured downtown Valdosta right now. A beautiful, charming old city north of the Florida-Georgia line. Valdosta has no power through much of the city. The schools are closed this week. The businesses are shuttered. It's hard to find gas. It's hard to find food. Donald Trump came here today to say that he wanted to speak with the local officials, to say that he wanted to show his support, help mobilize some supplies. He was at the podium behind me today, quite brief and somewhat cryptic with his criticisms of the Biden administration's response. He alluded to that Governor Brian Kemp in Georgia couldn't reach President Biden on the phone. That was a false claim. Governor Kemp said he spoke with President Biden yesterday. He also said he's been urging Elon Musk to help provide that satellite system to help provide Wi-Fi here. FEMA's in the process of providing Wi-Fi here in Valdosta. But to a degree, Major, this was a campaign stop built for the photo op. They put a podium and a loudspeaker behind me, surrounded by the fallen bricks. But I'll tell you, having spoken to a number of the folks here in town, I didn't have strong feelings either way. More transcendent ambivalence about this visit among the victims still trying to get their footing in this city. Take a listen to one of them.
Our focus is on our community, not any celebrity or politician that comes in. We appreciate any support we can get, but our focus is on our community.
If there was a diversion of resources, police and otherwise, it was brief today. The president's stop was a quick one. But folks here, Major, have a bigger priority of getting their kids back to school and their power back on. This visit didn't seem to move the meter.
And Scott, can I ask you if you detected any sense of wonderment or surprise at the magnitude of this storm based on what the residents there were anticipating before it arrived?
Yeah, I mean, this is the city that was right there in the crosshairs as this hurricane hit Georgia. The transcendent nature of the storm and the damage has shook people here, as you'd imagine. I asked Donald Trump if this enormity in this storm made him want to get more aggressive on policy to tackle climate change. And he said, no, not really. That's how he walked away from this event today, in what is clearly a battleground state and a city that's in a battleground community. This is quite something. This is a hurricane-ravaged area in a battleground state. Perhaps no surprise. It's also become a battleground campaign area.
And Scott, quickly, and forgive me if this is beyond what you've been able to gather. You've been gathering a lot of information there. It is a multifaceted scenario. Any sense there about what effect, if any, the storm could have on the ability of the community members to vote either early in person or other means heading up toward Election Day?
We're not seeing the type of damage that has shuttered government facilities for weeks or months at a time. There doesn't seem to be a concern that they can't stand up what they have to have stood up for voting, even early voting in this part of Georgia. That may be different than what they're seeing in Western Carolina right now. Doesn't seem to be a permeating issue here in the aftermath of the hurricane.
As always, our thanks to Scott MacFarlane on the scene for us. Thank you very much. Ed O'Keefe joins us now from the White House. Ed, this is, for every White House, a all-hands-on-deck situation. It is particularly so for the vice president, who is now leading the Democratic ticket. Catch us up on White House developments and knowledge and preparation and plans.
The president, Major, is in the midst of a briefing in the Oval Office right now with his Homeland Security advisor and a handful of other White House officials to try to get a handle on what the federal government needs to be doing to continue assisting North Carolina, Georgia, especially, and the other southern states hit in recent days. There's a special concern for what's going on in western North Carolina, the Asheville area. The president's Homeland Security advisor, a woman named Liz Sherwood Randall, came out to the briefing room earlier today and used the big number that we'd been hearing for the last several days, and that there could be as many as 600 people dead in this situation. And you could hear a gasp in the room, and she says, well, think about this. If up to 600 people in recent days have not been accounted for, even though those reports are sketchy, she said, it's possible it could get that high, but it is very likely, as it was in the wake of the Maui wildfires last year, for example, that a large number becomes a much smaller number once people are able to get to a telephone or recharge their cell phones or emerge from the damage, call relatives and say, I'm okay. And that's what they're hoping to hear in the coming days. But the fact that it's been now 48 hours, 72 hours since the storm hit, and there's still that many people unaccounted for, shows you the complexity of the situation and why the president today has devoted most of his time to it. As for the vice president, she canceled a series of campaign appearances this morning in Nevada to get back to Washington, arrived back here just a little while ago and is over at the FEMA headquarters right now meeting with senior agency officials, although the head of FEMA is down in western North Carolina and is going to stay there as long as the president tells her to. So who exactly the vice president's meeting over at headquarters is unclear. We're going to see footage of that in a little bit. But it scrambled her campaign, especially given that she was on the West Coast starting Friday with a stop at the border, then went to San Francisco and Los Angeles to raise more than $50 million over the weekend, held a rally in Las Vegas last night, and then got back here today. There she is right now at FEMA headquarters. And, so a moment in which her campaign had to scramble, and very well may have to scramble her calendar later this week, should the ability to get down to the storm zone open up and she can make some kind of a visit.
And Ed, I mentioned the word preparation as I threw my question to you. It's harder and harder for administrations led by any particular political party to plan for the magnitude of these intense weather events because you're not sure the geography of the worst damage.
Yeah.
Western North Carolina, a classic example of that.
It is. And what Liz Sherwood Randall told reporters earlier today is that in the lead up to this storm, given where it was coming from in the Gulf, the primary concern was on the possibility that it had the potential to level Tallahassee, a major metropolitan area. That, of course, did not happen, and then it went inland. She said there were resources in North Carolina in anticipation of this, but you don't put it too close to the actual storm zone because if you do, they too could also get destroyed and then be unuseful to those that need the relief. So they're pushing that in now, and the hope is that they can help local and state and private and nonprofit organizations with relief.
Ed O'Keefe at the White House, thank you very much.